Hey guys, it's Beth, and today I'm here with a tutorial on how I made my envelope album, like the one that I did here for my Happy Fall mini album project. Just keep in mind that I did not create the envelope album. I don't even know who did. It's been around for a while, and I'm not even sure who to credit for the way that I do them. I've watched so many videos on these over the years, and I kind of feel like my process is kind of a hodgepodge of the different processes that I've seen. So I kind of, as I watched the videos, I kind of remembered things that I liked best about each process, or what worked best for me out of each process, and kind of combined them to my own little process. So just something to remember when you're watching tutorials. If you've seen a bunch and they all do it differently, then by all means pick your favorite parts out of each of those processes and make your own. So the most important thing you're going to need is some envelopes, and I recommend, the sturdy envelopes are awesome. They work best. And if you can find a deal on envelopes, like I had found this box of off-white 6x6 envelopes at Goodwill. There were at least 50 in there for a whole 69 cents. So that was a great deal. And this makes for if you get a good deal on the envelopes, it makes for very inexpensive album pages. So budget craft tip. So here are my envelopes. You are also going to need some strong adhesive. You could like wet glue, score tape, whatever your jam is. You'll need some chipboard for your cover, and some tool that allows you to score, and then a trimmer or scissors, and I think that's it. Paper to decorate it with. So I have 5 envelopes here because my album had 10 pages, and on each one of the pages I had like this opening at the end that had a pocket and a little tab that slides in and out. So if you want to do that on your pages, then you need to cut that first before you start putting your album together. So that's what I'm going to start with here. And you're not taking very much off. You just want to literally slice off that very end. If you are not doing a cover for your album, like a separate cover, like binder, or even just a chipboard cover for yours, then I would not slice the ends off of your outer 2 envelopes. So for example, here is a quick one I did with envelopes, and I did not add an extra cover. I just decorated the top of the top envelope, and then the back of the back envelope is my cover, essentially. So I did not open the ends of these on any of them, but had I sliced the ends off, I would have only done it on these middle 3 and not done them on what would be my cover, front and back cover. Hopefully that makes sense. Just because, I don't know, it may work, but I always just find from like a stability standpoint, it's just best not to do too much to that cover if you're not reinforcing it with chipboard. Okay, last one here. Slice off that very end. And then I'm pretty much done with my trimmer. So the next thing that I like to do, and this depends on how bulky you are going to make your album. If you have any dimension at all in there, plus if you're adding a lot of paper layers or you're adding a lot of dimensional embellishments, then I recommend this just because it will give you a little more wiggle room in your album. But I score my envelopes like at about 1/8 of an inch on the flap. So again, not a whole lot, but just enough so that it gives, and you're not going to be able to see this here, but it gives you, once you fold this and you fold your pages, it kind of gives you a little more space in between each page. So for my, since I'm using an old trimmer with the scoring blade, I just go like right at the edge of the blade track. Because I found that on that last one I did, even though I didn't add a whole lot of chunky embellishments, once I got all my pocket pages in there and all my cardstock and pattern paper, it bulks up fairly quickly. So I'm kind of glad I did this. Okay. So I'm going to set that aside. And you are going to be folding your envelope flaps backwards. So when I fold at my score, I'm going to fold backwards. Once you get the process down, these go together pretty quickly. And like I said, if you can find some envelopes that are a good deal, like if you pick them up, like I found some 6x6 envelopes on clearance at Hobby Lobby a while back, so 99 cents for 12 maybe. So not as good as 69 cents for 50, but still, it gave me some different colors. So now I think I picked up some craft ones and white ones at Hobby Lobby. So like I said, not as good a deal as finding them at yard sales or thrift stores, but still would make inexpensive pages. Okay, so all of mine are scored, and now we can start putting it together. So for this part, we're essentially going to be feeding one flap of one envelope into the opening of another envelope, and this is what makes our pages. You can use, excuse me, you can use score tape or wet glue for this. I've not used ATG. I don't know how well that would hold up. I would be cautious of how thick your envelopes are. For me, I find, if the envelopes are a little bit thicker and my paper that I'm using is a little bit thicker, then, something like art glitter glue works wonderful because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room. If I'm using thinner envelopes and or thinner paper, I like to use score tape just because it doesn't cause anything to buckle or sometimes even if you're not using a whole lot of wet glue on something thin, it can, and if you don't get it spread out enough, it can cause the paper to ripple a little bit, so keep that in mind. Okay. So like I said, we are going to be sliding them in like that so that, the front of one envelope is facing the back of another one. So I am going to add a little glue here along the edges of this flap. Slide it in, and I want to make it so that where my score marks are, that the envelopes sit flat where the score part was, and that they're laying fairly straight to each other. And once I'm happy, I can kind of come in and then start pressing this down and hope that it stayed in the right spot. Okay, so now you should have a flap here that opens all the way through, because we sealed this flap to the top of the envelope. And that's okay, because it's going to be blocked by your spine anyway in the end. And now we're going to continue the process. Gluing one envelope into another. And like I said, score tape works good for this as well because it's fairly strong. It just doesn't give you the wiggle room to make sure you're in the right spot, because once the tape is down, it's down. But I do use that at times. Like this one, I need it to come up a little bit so I can get my little extra scored section out there. Okay, and we keep adding. And I may speed this last little bit up. We'll see how long it takes me. I need to make sure that my little scored, the little 1/8 inch section there is out far enough that it's distinct. There we go. Okay. Then we have our last envelope here. Okay, so now you should have one envelope that still has a remaining flap and one envelope that just has the opening and no flap. If you are going to not do any kind of cover, you can stop here, glue this down, decorate over it, leave an exposed spine, or cover it with paper like I did here, because again this one had no separate covers. I just used the top and bottom envelope as my cover. I've seen where people have taken the flap and kind of glued it around to cover up the spine area and, you know, just kind of reinforce the connection of all the pages. You can do that. Or if you want to create more of a sturdy binder cover like this, you actually need to create a flap for the remaining envelope that doesn't have one. So I just have a piece of cream cardstock that kind of matches my envelopes, not really, but it's not going to be that noticeable. And I have cut it down. It's about 4 inches this wide, I guess, and then I have trimmed it so it's just like shy of the size of my envelope, so it kind of slides in easily. And what we're going to do is leave about, we want at least like 1 inch or so in to stay inside the envelope, but then we're going to mimic the shape of the flap. And what this will do is it will help us connect the other side to our binder cover. So see, it slides in there. And now we also want to score it so that it will bend back. So I said I wanted to leave about 1 inch inside my envelope, maybe 1.25 inches. And then I'm going to go down about 1/8 of an inch. And score again, and again, that just gives me some leeway for when I'm attaching it. So go ahead and fold up, doesn't matter, fold up these guys. And I'm going to slide it in, and I'm going to add glue right here. Excuse me. And treat it just like we did with the other ones. And give myself enough margin here so that my scorer here doesn't want to fold right. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to let this sit for a bit, kind of set up, dry. And now we are going to work on our binder cover. So I have 2 pieces of like medium weight chipboard, and they are both cut to 6.5 by 6.25. And that's going to be my front and back cover. And then I have a piece that is 6.5 by 3/4 of an inch. And so I'm using 2 different sheets of paper, one for my front, one for my back. And they are both 7.25 by 7.5. So I always like to go, if I'm wrapping chipboard, I always like to go 1 inch bigger than whatever my chipboard is. So this is going to be the front, and this is back. And then I also have a piece that's covering the spine. So I will end up, I'm going to glue those together first, but I got to figure out how much room to leave. That on top there. So this will essentially create one long piece of paper to cover my album. Okay. I'm going to pull in my score tape, and I'm basically going to put tape on the outer edge of my front sheet. And this end, the very end of my spine piece. because then once I overlay them, I will have glue at the outer edge of both parts. So my struggle is always getting them together in the right spots, giving myself enough room for my spine. Okay. And actually what I think I'm going to do, and I forgot about this part, is add a little bit of glue to the outer piece of my spine so that I can get it, so I can keep it in the same spot. It's not going to slide around on me. And I don't think I mentioned, my spine piece was 7.5 inches by 4 inches. So it's the same height as whatever my front and back pieces are, and I just picked 4 random because I figured it would be about 1 3/4 to 1.5 inches covering on my front and back. Okay, so then I'm going to come fairly close to my spine and put it down. Again, you can use wet glue here if you want wiggle room and if your paper is thick enough. And I feel like something is not lined up. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing here, and keep in mind this is directional, so I want to make sure that I'm putting my tape on the right end. So be aware if you have any directional paper. Okay. So then I want to put this one on, making sure that my bottom and top edges, I'm fine if my spine piece is a little bit longer, because that's easy to trim down. Alright, so now I want to put my cover pieces on so that they will stay in place. And I'm just going to use a little bit of score tape. You can use your ATG here if you want to. You can use your wet glue. Just, it's not holding anything together, it's just keeping it from sliding on you. Make sure my pieces are going in the right direction. I always feel so awkward when I'm doing tutorials. That's why I don't do them very often. I always just feel like I don't feel like I'm an awkward crafter other than that, but I do feel awkward when I'm doing these. Okay. So I am also going to miter my corners before I start folding up, and that's because, especially since this piece is longer, that will allow me to fold the corners without the bulk. And so then kind of start folding up, train your paper a little bit. You want to try to prevent your paper from tearing. also want to, you can come in and score in between your spine piece and your covers, because you also want to train that to fold. So that actually makes your spine. Okay, so I am going to add score tape to my paper. Some people add it to the chipboard. I tend to add it to my paper. That way I know I'm gonna not have like excess hanging over somewhere. I don't know. Everybody has their way. Okay, so that is done. And by the way, the score tape I'm using is the Squing score tape, and I got mine off of Amazon. Amazon has all the different sizes, so I will leave a link to that below if you're interested. And then it's up to you on where you want to start folding in. You want to make sure that you get a nice tight fold up against your chipboard. Make sure that's going to fold. And there's that. Now we just have the two ends. Again, I'm going to make sure that's going to fold, since there's 3 layers up there at the top that need to fold together. And my last side. And now we have a binder. I used to be so scared of binder type covers for anything. I just resisted it for a long time. I thought it was going to be really hard, and it's really not at all. I wish I wouldn't have waited it so long to try them. But I tend to do that a lot. I always think things are going to be harder than they are. Okay, so then I am also going to add some paper to the inside of my covers to cover up my chipboard here. And so I just chose the same pattern for both, and they are 6 by 6, and that covers like all of the visible space. But before I do that, I need to put my envelopes in. Otherwise, it's not an envelope album. It's just an album. Okay, so I am having to redo putting my envelopes into my binder because I flinched and got it down in the wrong spot and had to tear it up and redo my album pages. So, take two. Forgot to make my little envelope piece here. Okay. Going to take my score tape, put it on my flaps. And you know what? I probably should have learned from my last time not to use the score tape, to use my art glitter glue and give myself some wiggle room. So we're going to pull that off, and we're going to use the glitter glue. But the thing is making sure I get it lined up in the right spot. Again, I'm not going to try not to put glue down here so it's got a little bit of lift. I apologize if I get my head in the way. Trying to get this centered on the spine in both directions. Because I want to have enough leeway that it lays flat no matter where my pages are open to. So if I cover that, will that still work? Okay. Sometimes, guys, I'm trial and error. Which is another reason why I don't like to film like crafting with me, because I'm awkward and I'm trial and error, and I'm like, oh hey, that didn't really work very well. Let's try this. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to mention that will also help with the opening and closing is finding your crease marks on your spine and creasing your envelopes so that it kind of naturally folds there, or where your envelopes attach. And that will also help train it a little better. Okay. So now I'm going to add my pieces onto the inside of my binder cover, and these are they're 6x6 pattern paper, and they're just covering up the ugliness of the chipboard and where the envelope attaches. Just makes it pretty. Alright, burnished. Pull off my backing. And again, I have directional paper, so I need to make sure that my words are facing up. And I basically want to just make sure that I'm covering the ends of where my paper is folded over, but I don't want to go so far in towards my spine that I interfere with the closing. And that works. So then I just do the same thing on this side. And here I've got like a little bit of my cover that's poking out. Burnish that down a little bit. And there we go. We have a 10-page album here. And now I can decorate my cover. I just have a stitch circle that I cut off one edge of. And then I've got my, what is that, cut apart, my 3x4 cut apart. So I am going to use score tape on these guys, and I have score tape backing everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to line that up just so it kind of like is centered on the circle. I have my Echo Park bow here. I've taken the foam off, and I'm just going to overlap it up here. And I used score tape to attach the last one. I probably could have used hot glue, but I took the foam off because, one, the foam wasn't overly sticky, and two, I didn't want that much dimension on the front of my album. For some reason, I can't do a whole lot of dimension on the front of my albums. I mean, I could physically, but I just don't. It's like I don't mind having some 3D items, but I don't like to add tons of height to the front. So then I also just have this little piece of pumpkin that I cut off of another cut apart, and I already had tape on this one. So I'm just going to put him kind of down here towards the bottom on the side of my cut apart. And then that's done. So now we just have to decorate the pages. But I'm going to take a moment here, clean up some of the score tape debris on my desk, and we'll be back with the pages. Okay, so to speed up time, I have already put score tape on the back of my pages. And if you missed my project share video of this album that I did, I explained that when I made this one, I went ahead and made a duplicate set of pages for this other album because I knew I wanted to make two, and so just to be more efficient with my time, rather than trying to remember what I did or what I cut something, I just went ahead and made two of everything at the same time. So now all I have to do is put them together. So I will probably put this to some music and just speed it up a little bit as I finish it off. I should note though that when I'm lining mine up, I cut my pages so that there was like an 1/8 inch border here, an 1/8 inch border between my page and the envelope. So my envelope, or my page doesn't cover the whole envelope. There's like a little bit of border. So. Okay, my last page is on, and to give you a quick flip through, I made it just like the one I did a project share on the other day, with a lot of interactive elements, pockets, tags, lots of room for lots of pictures here. And so I also pre-made the little tabs that go in the ends of the envelopes. And again, this was a silhouette file that I found, like a file folder tab. And they just slide right in. Sometimes they want to slide, probably could have made them a little bit deeper. And there we go. So some additional thoughts that I have about the envelope album. Like I said, you know, if you can find a great deal on envelopes, it makes these albums, you know, fairly or a little more inexpensive. You could also make, like if you make your envelopes, you could also make an album with those envelopes that you make, and your pages are, you know, made of pretty paper, and you can maybe just embellish those a little bit more, maybe add a photo mat. So that might require a little less additional paper that's needed. And then there's also different ways to do the cover as well. You know, it can be simple, it can be a little more sturdy. It's kind of all in what you have available and what you're looking for at the time. But if you have any questions on anything, please let me know. And I know I did do I pre-made the pages, I didn't do that on video. So if you have any questions on how I did any of the pages, let me know. And I will link the products that I use in the description box below. And I think that's it. Stay tuned for some more projects from my Happy Fall pad that I've been having fun playing with. But I thank you guys so much for your time today, and I hope you're having a great crafty weekend.